Welcome, everybody, to episode 303 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, January 31st, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by J Trip.
Hello.
J Trip, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Say hello, John.
Hello, Jeff.
Okay.
Hello,
thank
John.
you. I said, all right, there we go. So it's January 31st. Boy, we're almost into February. Hopefully nothing disastrous happens on the show. I mean, was today the super blue blood moon. That sounds like it could be a really bad time for hospitals all across the country.
I can just think of nothing but Zelda Breath of the Wild references with
there you go.
blood moons and everything else. So that's all it reminded me of.
There you have it. So we had a rocking show last week. We're going to have a rocking show today. However, we do want to start off with a bit of sad news, and that is the passing of Efrain Rivera. Our condolences out to his family. As I understand it, he passed away of a sudden heart attack. He was a longtime contributing member and volunteer in the Florida WordPress community. I was told by a couple of people who have been to a number of WordCamps throughout the Florida area that he was volunteering at every one of them. So Orlando, Tampa, Miami. And from what I've heard, he was just one of those really happy fellas that always greeted you and helped you out down in Florida. Nice. So it seems like we lost a really great member of the community down in Florida. And John, you actually had the chance to meet that.
Oh, yeah. Right? Oh, gosh, several times, year over year over year. This is 10 years of WordCamp Miami coming in March. So wow. when I heard the news, I was really super bummed out, actually, because for me, I saw him every year and never got to actually sit down and have a meal or hang out or do the thing that you want to do when you're at a WordCamp like that. And so it was always hey, hello, how are you? Okay, yeah, it's awesome. Oh, it's so good to see you. How are things? Everything's good. Cool. Okay.
Because he's so busy being an organizer.
Yep, that's exactly right. So it's really sad, and it's gonna make Miami a little bit different this year. So
and something else. His sister wrote a post about his passing on Facebook, and that's how we all learned about it. But she had said that she had spoken to him 20 minutes before this happened, and he was really happy and he was in good spirits. And then 20 minutes later, he has a heart attack, and now he's gone. So it's just one of those times where you think about life, you think of Snickers. Life comes at you fast, but it goes away just as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So our condolences out to his family, and thoughts and prayers are with you. And I believe David Bissett, who is a hell of a contributing member down in the Florida area, I think he may be writing a post or something to that effect. I know I talked to him privately, and like you, he was in shock and he was trying to collect his thoughts on his passing. So we'll see what happens there. We have some big news stories to go over later on in the show. But before we get to those, this one's even bigger. We got Zach Gordon on the show today. Zach Gordon is a professional educator with years of experience teaching in the classroom, leading workshops, giving talks, and recording online courses. He has taught a range of web-related topics from design and development to traditional programming and even robotics. Hell, you're probably going to get into 3D printers at some point if you haven't already. But Zach, thanks a lot for joining us on the show today.
Hey, shucks, y'all. It is an honor to be here. Let me say, also, just off of that Ephraim tip, yeah, I had a chance to meet him in passing a number of times. Life is very precious. So even more grateful to be just alive and here today. Honored to be on the show with you too. Thank you.
Awesome. I believe this is your first time on WordPress Weekly, correct?
It is. It is.
I'm so excited. I wish we had a jingle for that. This is cool. This is cool. There are still people in the WordPress community that have their first time on the show. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign for me in this show. By the way, for those of you listening to the show, we've all got our cameras turned on, but Zach is wearing his Deeply hat. Tell us a little bit about that hat.
Well, it's one of the things I could find that wasn't trademarked that kind of went along with the stuff I was teaching, but also kind of I felt fit in with a larger crowd of folks who weren't programmers. So I was told you need a shirt or you need something kind of branding up there. Just you're always wearing other people's gear. So started doing these deeply caps, and it's been fun. I like the look. I got a shirt too, but didn't want to go overboard.
This is sort of a nod towards the homework assignment that Matt gave us a few years ago. Learn JavaScript deeply, correct?
That is true. It's definitely a ripoff of that. And sorry, Matt. I hope that's okay. I never asked him, but you know,
I'm sure it's probably okay. So let's. So as it's your first time on the show, we always enjoy hearing people's origin stories with WordPress. Tell us how you got involved.
Wow. So my first encounters with WordPress were very early on. It was right after, I think, WordPress 2 dropped, whenever they came out with plugins. This is like early 2000s, I guess. And, you know, my background is in education. So I was in school for education and studying other things. And I just felt like I shouldn't graduate college without knowing this thing called like the internet and how it works and how to build things. So I kind of went through the process of learning all of that, and my mind was blown away when I discovered WordPress, and it's not just static HTML anymore, and stayed up for probably several days straight and have been pretty hooked ever since then. So early on, I was doing freelance client projects, but because I was teaching also, it very quickly became integrated with what I was teaching.
So how'd that, so you started off with WordPress, but how did you translate? How did you figure out that education was sort of a passion of yours, and this is something you wanted to do as a career?
Yeah, actually, it was through advice of just good mentors. You know, originally I wanted to study yoga and Sanskrit, and realized that probably wasn't the most practical career path. Although today it's much more practical than it was then.
Yeah, yoga's like in, man.
Yeah, it's the thing. So I went from that to studying like sustainable, organic, small scale farming, and I went to ag school for that. And then I was pointed out, like, actually, a farmer's life is very hard, and you have a very idealistic view about what farming is. So after that process, I got advice of like, why don't you be a teacher? You know, you'd probably be good at it. It's much more practical. You get the summers off. And I said, okay. And I mean, it just kind of went from there. But that's kind of the backstory to it. Like a lot of things in my life, I just stumble into them and the opportunity presents, and I say, let's go for it.
Tell us about your foray into Treehouse. Treehouse is a big time sort of education network. They have videos that cover a wide range of topics, and I know you were employed with them for a while doing courses.
Yeah, so let me say, like, that's probably one of the highlights of my professional career. That was an amazing company, and I still troll all the people who work there. And like, they just had us like company meetup, and I'm looking at all their pictures, like, hey, hi everybody. So I had been teaching previously. You know, I started off teaching high school, and then because of No Child Left Behind, I switched from teaching politics and history into teaching computer science. And you need a degree in a high school to teach what you're teaching. So I had to go back and get a computer science degree. And the second semester, the school was like, hey, you probably know more than some of our teachers. And they hired me. So I was in this weird position of working at a college as a professor while also getting my degree from the same classes. And I did that for a number of years. And after a while, I wanted to get more into the true kind of developer world. So I took a position at Blackboard. I don't know if any of you know the education company Blackboard.
Yeah, that's like the big time proprietary, service company in the education sector.
It is, and it was built with frames and Java, and I lasted a year and 12 days there, and during that time,
lasted.
I had a super fun time. So it was building a social network that connected, I think, like 12 million students within Blackboard, and had a chance to work on that as a user interaction experience designer. It was total fun, and I loved it, but it really wasn't for me long term. So Treehouse tried to hire Aaron Walter, who head up the MailChimp design team, and he's also done some great books for A List Apart. And him and I worked on open source stuff back in like the Jeffrey Zeldman days, like early 2000s. So they tried to hire him, and I think he was like, oh, that's silly. But maybe you should ask Zach Gordon, which is probably one of the best recommendations I've gotten in my life. And I thought they were joking when they emailed me, and it was just like an email that went out to a ton of people, and I didn't even respond at first. But that was how I ended up at Treehouse. And finally, like, they didn't ask me to teach a specific subject. They just said, give us part of the application process was submit some videos. And I thought, okay, I could either do JavaScript or I could do WordPress. And I'm like, they don't have much WordPress stuff. So I'll do some WordPress stuff. And I had no idea at that time that my life was to become greatly siloed. And that was really when my life became like 100% WordPress, because I had a lot of other interests at the time in the tech stuff. And so, yeah, I was there about 3 years and did 30+ courses and just had a great time. Amazing company, super cool, super fun. And it was just a blast. But then at a certain point, they decided they wouldn't continue to offer WordPress courses. And that was literally, I was let go on the Monday before the Saturday where Matt Mullenweg said, hey, go learn JavaScript deeply. So I was very scared what I was going to do.
December 2015.
December 2015. Yeah. Yeah. So it's synchronistic, right? Like that is crazy that those dates overlap the way they did. And I think it's been okay. It's been hard figuring out how to be a freelance educator. I guess that's what I call myself. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we think about being a freelance developer and bringing on clients. I mean, how have you been able to manage the whole aspect of being a freelance educator?
Well, to be honest, thank God we have debt in this country, because that's helped me get by. I mean, first of all, like, I am just so grateful for the WordPress community, because I wouldn't be able to make that transition when I decided, okay, I'm going to launch this master course. I had so much support. You know, Jeff, you were huge at like sharing what I was trying to do, and so many people. And you know, Triple J, I had your model for how to kind of like get some support from the community around doing projects. And that was literally how I was able to do it. Now, what was tricky is like I was doing enrollment periods, which was kind of at the advice of Troy Dean, a huge, a man I really look up to, who runs WP Elevation. And it was hard. I only got paid 3 times a year. And that's a tough situation, very different for me to live off of. So it was tricky, and I had to do a lot of hustling, going and doing some courses for other people, and unfortunately overcommitting. And I'm just now beginning to catch up with everything. It's been a hustle, but I'm grateful because I love the work I'm doing. It's meaningful, and people seem to benefit from it. So I want to keep
that's going. The thing with being independent or freelance is that you are forced to do all of the ancillary work that has nothing to do with the work that you actually want to do in the first place. And so, like, if you're just an independent anything, you have to do your own taxes or just do your own expenses, or at least give those to people to like that you trust and pay them to do those things. And so like when you are thrust to the position of like, well, you have to do everything now, is a tough spot, especially when like in the WordPress community, and I think like plugins or releases or Gutenberg or anything is like, our expectations on what a finished product looks like, if it's an online course or if it's a piece of code or if it's a thing, are so high that the production value and how many takes does it take for you to get a good recording, or the audio's good, or to get both well where they look and feel right. And then you have to do all the editing and all the screenshots. It's like to do all of that is having 10 jobs, and you have to do all of it. So you get really good at a lot of things that you don't want to be good at. But at the same time, like the flip side of that, and I'm curious if this is your take too, is the one thing that's been nice with WordPress being as mature of a community and platform as it is that at least in my experience, you have a reputation for being good at the things that you're good at. And so I've had a lot of help, honestly, for the things that I'm not good at doing. And so like you, I am good at saying yes to things, but also great at overextending myself. I have lots of good intentions, and I really do want to do all the things that I say that I'm going to do. But people have been very understanding when those things take longer than projected or anticipated. And even though I've gotten better at it, I'm curious what your being independent for as long as you've been independent now, has that been your experience, or what does that look like for you?
Oh, brother, you're spitting some truth there. Let me tell you what. So many things I could say on this. One, like I really wanted to keep the quality that Treehouse had, and I had some good sponsor money up front and tried to set up a home studio, which unfortunately I've wasted a lot. Not wasted, it's taken a lot of money to learn how to run a production thing, and it's only been more recently that I figured out some of the on-camera and lighting and other things. So Again, I'm just so grateful for the team I worked with at Treehouse, and I've had to hire an editor and legal and all this other stuff. And the marketing, honestly, has probably been almost as much time as core development. But yeah, the commitment to want to help people, the honestly underestimating how much work it would take to teach JavaScript from 0 to 100, or at least to like 80.
Right.
But what's funny, and like you said about the WordPress community being understanding, is that the stress that I've lived with, that is, anybody who knows me knows like how heavy this has weighed on me, of like, people paid me and I got to get this done, but I also got to figure out how to get enough money to feed my family. You know, I got a son and I live in the DC area, which is not cheap. So it's been tricky, but very worth it. And I'm just now getting to the point where, one, I even have enough faith that like things will keep coming, right? Because that's part of it too, is like you just learn to trust that things will work out. And I've gotten smarter, right? So now the courses I'm releasing, you see, are like a couple hours long and not like 80. But people have been out of, let's say I've had, you know, over 1,000 students, and maybe 2 or 3 dozen have had some pretty harsh words to say, and you know, wanted refunds plus money back. Like some people I've paid for a year to go to front-end masters, when they were like, "You're horrible. I could get more content on Udemy for $10 than you've put out in 2 years," which like honestly isn't actually true, but that hurts, and I feel for them and want to help. So there's been a little bit of that, but by and large, people have been very supportive. And luckily, like, learning JavaScript deeply is no small task. This is not a weekend or 1 month endeavor. So unfortunately, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but a lot of students who signed up have not actually completed or got too far in my course. I think about 5% of 1,000 people have watched all my content. So that has played a part, but I'm just so grateful
just
for the
give them an
lessons
F and say, move on. You failed. Isn't it, you know, we talk a little bit about synchronicity, or maybe it's just the way things go, but there's the Treehouse situation, and then Matt comes out on stage and says, learn JavaScript deeply. So boom, what does Zach do? Yeah, let's do a learn JavaScript deeply course. Okay, fantastic. Well, and then Matt comes on stage and says, hey, the future of the web is JavaScript. You know, messing around with REST API, endpoints, PHP, and what have you. But you know, front end interfaces, and that's JavaScript. So then we find out about Project Gutenberg. Well, what's Gutenberg going to be based on? JavaScript, which we find out is React. And you've recently sort of transitioned into perfect. You know, this is perfect for you. We'll just do a Gutenberg course. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the course. And in fact, I think just recently you made it available, correct?
Yeah, it came out on January 3rd. So the backstory to this was I did about 13 different WordCamps in this last year, and all workshops, so no real lectures, and it was really great. I wanted to teach more people in person because I miss that. You know, I'm sitting in an empty basement here and might have 1,000 students, but I see a handful, right, or ever meet them. So I wanted to do a lot of workshops and invested a lot of my personal money to go do that. And by the time WordCamp US came around, I was so burnt out that I almost didn't go. I had a ticket. I knew I had to. And folks were like, dude, you have to go, right? You're going to hear things. You're going to be exposed. You're going to talk to people. You got to network, all the reasons we know to go. And I'm so glad I did, because I had no intentions to teach Gutenberg until it was in core. And historically, that's always been my approach. Is definitely my approach at Treehouse. Like, if API is going to come out, I'll teach you when it gets into core, which I did. But Gutenberg was a little bit different. And I remember the exact moment Matt was like, it's coming out in April or something like that, 18 revisions. He was very clear. And my jaw dropped, and words I can't say now just came out. And I turned to the person next to me and I'm like, I have to drop everything I'm doing and do a Gutenberg course, don't I? And they're like, yeah, you do. Because otherwise, how are people going to learn this? It has not been something easy to learn. So when I left there, I set myself a goal of, before the end of the year, I'm going to do as much content as I can. And at the end of the year, I'm just going to release whatever I have, an MVP. And this was a very new model, right, for me, because in the past, I wanted to get as everything done as possible and do deeply and take my time and perfection. And this was the opposite approach. It's like, let's just get something out there. And I'm so glad I did. So, you know, I try to stay away from things like too much coffee or Red Bull, but my house was littered with these things. And I literally just took the Nikola Tesla Edison, Leonardo da Vinci approach and worked till I passed out, woke up, stretched, and kept working, which I know I know many people listening have been there. And I did that for a month straight. Yeah, just about. And the core team was huge. I had to ask tons of questions because it wasn't really documented. And they were so supportive. Riyadh, Greg, a number of people have been, they've done more than they ever needed to help me along with that. So I think it was January 3rd, I was able to finally get it up on the site, because the other thing I forgot to check was that my editor was on vacation. So on top of needing to do all the course, I also had to edit the whole thing, which I don't normally do. I usually farm that out. So
that's one of the interesting things to me is that, usually if you do a course on WordPress, it's established, it's in core, it's not going to be changing that much. It's already gone through the development phase, but we heard the announcement at Project Gutenberg. It was started as a plugin. It's still a plugin. There's a lot of work going into it. There's a lot of changes that are happening on a weekly, even monthly basis. It just seems sort of fascinating to me that you'd be able to do a Gutenberg course while all this change is ongoing.
Dude, you nailed it. The thing that surprised me, though, is a lot of it is quite stable. So the internal core functions to build a block and the architecture is it's all there and it's all done. And honestly, I'm probably going to have to change some things, but it's the things I'm going to have to update are like nested blocks coming or state being introduced and a new thing. So I was very pleasant to find. And a lot of people said that, like, how can you do a course? It's not done yet. And it's actually very far along. And I just have so much respect and gratitude for the very small team that's done a crazy amount of architecture.
I remember Lisa Sabin Wilson when she wrote the BuddyPress for Dummies book.
Yes.
She was like, by the time that the book was out, BuddyPress 1.1 was out, and it was a completely different thing. Like, it wasn't even like there was a revision to the book. Like, yeah, she's done 8 or 9 revisions to WordPress for Dummies over the years. She's like, I need to rewrite the BuddyPress book, and I'm going to wait to do that until stuff just settles down. Like, you guys need to stop changing stuff so much. And so by the time that we were at 2.0 and everything had kind of settled largely in, she's like, yeah, I don't know, I'll worry about it. So maybe there will be another BuddyPress book at some point, but it was risky. I think. How scared were you in doing Gutenberg courses, or did you know that you would just make the time to fill in the gaps or re-record stuff?
Well, my thought was, even if I never updated it, if I release a 4-hour course and charge $49 and people complain 6 months later that it's missing something, I could potentially take the approach of, hey, would love to help you. I'm kind of busy. I can't. So I knew worst case scenario, I was still doing something that, because again, my goal was to help people who are trying to release plugins and update their stuff by April. Right. So that was my goal, was to help those people. And what happens after that, we'll see. But it is going to be something that I have to, go back and update. But again, not as often as people might think.
So you have a unique perspective on Gutenberg. You took a deep dive into it in a way that you wanted to educate others about it. So, I mean, we're talking about the deep internal architecture, structures, how things work in Gutenberg. So for those of us listening who may not know exactly what Gutenberg is, or maybe they're a developer and they haven't quite taken a dive as deep as you have, what's your experience been like with Gutenberg? And have you been able to sort of see the light on the other side of the tunnel, so to speak, where we've heard all this talk about how Gutenberg is going to be the future of WordPress, how it will evolve and make WordPress relevant again for years to come. Have you been able to see that realization with your work with Gutenberg?
Short answer, yes. I think number one, if you didn't listen to Matt's advice 2 years ago and go learn JavaScript deeply, oh man, So I'm really glad that I learned React and I learned all the ES6, 7, 8 and stuff, because knowing that when you open up Gutenberg, it's so clean. It's just a beautiful React app. It's so nice. It's well architected. All these conventions are followed. You could literally copy and paste chunks of code from core into your blocks, and it works. And you could just like easily import their stuff into it. So that is refreshing, because if you've ever dug into like the media library or some of the other major parts of core and integrating, it's not always been super pleasant or intuitive or following standards that you might see in Laravel or elsewhere, right? So Gutenberg breaks that mold, and it shows. And it also is very clear because they hired a lot of people that knew nothing about WordPress to build it. They hired a bunch of JavaScript developers, right? Well, let me say, there's a lot of people that do know WordPress on it, but there's been more of this influx of folks coming in. So at a technical level, I'm very happy with it. But I kind of had this experience of getting really happy and then realizing that this is still integrated with WordPress. So there's a lot of things that just aren't going to work the way you would if you had a truly modern app built from the ground up. So we're kind of taking this great thing and we're slapping it on, and the integration points are where it gets a little funky for me. And I don't want to knock it too much, because every decision that I am like, oh, this isn't great, I understand why they did it and the limitations that they had. And as I did this, and hopefully more people will experience, you just go back and you listen to people's arguments for and against Gutenberg, and you realize, oh, you don't actually know what you're talking about. Like, none of these things are relevant. So it felt very refreshing for me to actually learn it so I could understand it. And then a lot of the issues that I heard people saying, I'm like, oh, those aren't really issues.
Right.
What blew my mind and like the kind of oh moment I had was when I began to see, wait, this block can go anywhere. Now it can't yet, but once I began to feel, oh, I could code something in cool JavaScript and it could go here and it could go there. It could go on another site. Can I pull this into a whole nother application? Right? Like that's when it really began to get exciting for me. And it's not fully there yet, but the underlying architecture is. So I think we're going to see a transformation in a really good way come to the editor. I think nested blocks is what we really have to see before everybody is super wowed, because then you could really have cool columns and that stuff. And then once it gets into customizer and widgets go away. But I feel good, and I'm glad that other people are doing this, and it's not on me to make these decisions. Let me tell you that, because they get some slack, and that cannot be fun. But they're doing really good jobs.
Do you think maybe with the way, Gutenberg sort of paves the way for, like you said, it's sort of this ground up type thing for the editor and some of the other things we're doing in core, but maybe it sort of provides a foundation to reinvent WordPress from the inside out?
Unfortunately, no. Like we still have PHP on the back end. We still don't really have some real funnels to be able to do some of the like API integrations, or, because all the blocks are in content, that gets really complicated. And then some stuff might be meta, but it might also be content. Then what do you do with that? And how do you put meta into content without it being a block? Like, no, we're not there, but we're really close, and it's getting better. But I still am not sure how we will ever cross that bound, just because of the former architecture that we have, a lot of stuff being PHP. Like, I'll give one quick example. When you create a block right now, it's all done in JavaScript, but that presents an issue because you can't tell on the PHP side if a block is being loaded and loaded or unloaded. So now they're thinking about putting all the registering of blocks back into PHP. And then you get into a scenario where like, oh, I got to go here to set it up, but then I got to go to my JavaScript to customize it. And then there's this whole other type of block called a dynamic block, where in order to get the block to work in the editor, you have to build it all with JavaScript. But in order to get the block to work on the front end, you have to build it all with PHP. So you're literally duplicating your code. And that's what I'm like, but I get it. Like, it's tricky to do workarounds with it. So that's why I don't know if we'll ever get past that or how that will happen. But luckily they have really people smarter than me to figure these things out. So I've got faith.
And probably for someone like you, it's probably reassuring to hear Matt continually place emphasis on, especially this year, on trying to make the REST API and WordPress a first-class citizen, and REST API, all the things, create all the endpoints with WordPress.
Well, what I will say is really cool is that the convention for how to do things now, if you want to like let's say, for example, if you have a block that you also want to save as metadata so you could filter it and query it that way, REST API. Done. Like, that's the standard now. So that's exciting that that has happened, and we're there now. So if you want to be doing and saving data in blocks in complex ways, even if you want to save a plugin option or a meta box or anything else that's not the content, it's REST API integrations all the way. And now we have literally 4 different client ways to do REST API requests built into WordPress core once Gutenberg comes. We've got jQuery, we've got the WP API backbone, we've got API requests, and we've got a React version with API data. So it's kind of an overabundance of, yes, this is definitely the way moving forward. And that's cool to see.
Any comments on that, John? Or should I just, maybe I shouldn't have asked it first.
No, so the REST API still bums me out because I think I like GraphQL better. And so building something on top of something that I don't like anymore is hard for me to like personally get behind. I will get behind it for other people, and because it is like the best we have and the good right thing for the community and all those things. But gosh, I really would just like
didn't we already have like a discussion where
we did?
We're trying to catch up with the REST API now, but we already kind of know, or it's been pointed out that GraphQL is the future. It's the successor of REST API. So
and then I think when we're like, we talk about the future of WordPress like it's a thing that needs saving, when nobody talks about the future of any other piece of software like it's a thing that, like, okay, we might complain about iOS or Mac OS or whatever. We complain about specific issues, but nobody says like, oh my goodness, the future of Chrome as a web browser is in peril because of something. No, the team that's working on it is just going to keep working on it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And so internally, like for the people that are listening to this podcast, like the future of WordPress being a REST API, or the future of WordPress being a new block-based editor, or the future of WordPress being whatever comes after that, or whatever comes after that. It's like good to know that these things, you get Christmas morning by thinking about the anticipation of the thing that is coming. But the notion that these are things that will somehow elevate all of what we do to some next level, and we will transcend WordPress in its old, things we don't like about it in some other way is kind of old to me. Like, I'm kind of, I don't know, it seems like we should be past that. And like on a technical level, having to build a JavaScript version of a PHP template or a PHP version of a JavaScript template is terrible. And so it's just not good. And the nice thing about PHP is that it can parse. It is just the simplest templating thing in the world. And so dump your JavaScript out and be done with it. Don't redo it. Just use the JavaScript in a script tag somewhere and just use that same thing. Don't do it twice. And if the future of WordPress is supposed to be learning JavaScript deeply, then abandon the PHP side of theming and just do it all JavaScript wise. So I don't think that we'll feel the full effects of that until we get to the T in our ETC. Until we get to the Gutenberg T for a theme, people are still going to be in this hybrid middle transitional place of like, well, I feel comfortable in the PHP side, but I feel like I know I need to do the other JavaScript side. And so you end up stuck. And I think people have to dive into the JavaScript deeply side of it, write a full JavaScript theme, a full React front end app theme thing, use something out there that already has some baked in type of support, some framework 7, Ionic, I don't care, something that gives you like endpoints, a front end, blocks, understand it, and then you'll have a full appreciation for abandoning the PHP side of theming kind of 100%. But
well, here's hoping the Gutenberg theme is example number 1 of doing all that.
It will have to be. It will absolutely have to be. But the one thing I've always said about WordPress the reason why we are all talking about WordPress every week the way we do is the low barrier of entry and how simple it is to understand a template hierarchy, how simple it is to understand HTML, how simple it is to see this goes here. And all I have to do is put it here, and it all is magic and happens. Of a JavaScript theme, whatever that theme, or Gutenberg theme, whatever that theme is, it will be the underscores for pretty much every Gutenberg theme that comes out in that first year worth of themes. And so the emphasis that goes onto that team that builds that theme, it will be twice whatever it is on Gutenberg by itself. Because not only are people using Gutenberg Core, for examples, for blocks, everyone is going to use that Gutenberg theme as the canonical example for how to build a Gutenberg theme, or a Gutenberg supported theme, or whatever. So it's just a lot of blanks that we still have to fill in. And so it's good that on the educational side of it, holy crap, that we have good teachers like you here to help everyone with that, because these are deeply complicated combinations of languages, of software, front end, back end, all of it. So without some clarity of thought, without abstracted, without someone on the outside to go, okay, well, this is important, but you're not going to get here until you get here first, and to lay that out and walk somebody through it and hold their hand, there will be seasoned developers who will need to watch courses because they just need to catch up quickly.
Yep.
So,
Jeff, can I interject something there real quick?
Sure.
I just want to say,
this is your show.
One, I love to listen to that, John. Like, that was some good talk you just gave, and thumbs up to that, because yeah, the WP GraphQL plugin and Jason Ball's work is amazing. And that, like, we knew before it even rolled into core that we were already catching up. So at least now we've got React, which is not catching up, right? That's pretty standard and good. But you do need to go out and build something outside of WordPress just with JavaScript to learn this. And I also just want to say that, like, I've seen kind of a split in folks, maybe not fully teaching to the same level I am, but in trying to help train and figure out how to teach people. Like, there's kind of this divide right now of, hey, no, you don't really need to learn ES6 or Webpack or Babel or linting, what I call modern JavaScript, because folks don't call it ES6. Like, ES6 was the JavaScript that came out in 2015. We're now on ES8, right? So modern JavaScript, I think, is the right terminology to use. You need to learn this. Like, WordPress community, stop saying it's okay that we could be coding JavaScript that's like 5 years old and not need to learn, because in Gutenberg, you could code without using these, but your code's like this big, and it's ridiculous. So I really want to encourage people, shake a little finger, hand pat on the back if you've done it. But it's time, y'all. We need to step up, and we can't just let ourselves be like, oh, we live in a bubble and we don't have to stay up to date. So hopefully this will be the impetus for that.
Speaking of terminology, what a great segue. Morten Rand Hendrickson created a GitHub issue a few days ago titled Create Deprecation Plan for the Gutenberg Name. And I'm not going to read the entire ticket out, but he says, Gutenberg is a fine name for this project, but unless we stop using it now, it'll become a point of great confusion once the feature is merged with core. And I'll read a little bit from his ticket. He says, as blocks and block editing move closer to maturity and core merge, a plan is needed for how to get the community to think of these as core features, not add-on features included through a plugin named for an old German goldsmith. This is a matter of some urgency, as the names Gutenberg and Gutenblocks is being used for and applied to articles, tutorials, documentation, and solutions, including plugins and themes that will live on long after the core merge. So sort of an idea of, let's start calling it something that will live on long after it's merged in the core. And I've given this some thought. And as I said during the pre-show, I think back to the days of MP6, which was the code project name for the redesigned backend interface of WordPress. And when it was merged in the core, then it just became the newly designed, the back end of WordPress. There was no MP6 emphasis there. However, Gutenberg is a totally different thing. It touches the editor. It's a huge change in WordPress. And if you do a search for Gutenberg, you end up seeing stuff about the Gutenberg project, the printing press. It's hard to find actual information now about the WordPress sort of specific Gutenberg project. So, Zach, you have courses now. You have branding associated with Gutenberg, and What's your take on this? And do you have sort of a plan to change your branding if it comes to that?
Yes, I have so much to say about this in a lot of different ways. I actually, based on like kind of our pre-show discussion though, I'd kind of like to hear John say some things first, because I don't want to.
Oh no!
Really good points that you were making and valid and giving some context.
And
then
I could a GitHub response.
I could just weigh in with my own thing. Yeah, folks, go check out this GitHub issue. It's been kind of tweeted around. Maybe we could share it out again, and so you can kind of follow along. But I'd love if
we'll put it in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes.
Okay, cool.
My comments on this GitHub issue are probably the least liked. I have no thumbs up or reaction. And so I don't feel like they really don't deserve this much attention. But the point of all of this, I think, and I'm making I might be misremembering and I might be making stuff up, but I don't think that's the case. Where if the plan for Gutenberg is for it to live on outside of WordPress proper, if this is an open source React-based way to edit content, then it has to stay named Gutenberg. The decision to name it Gutenberg was made before the first line of code was ever written. And it may just happen to be, on the technical level, a really cool interface that happens to use TinyMCE for editing some WYSIWYG type blocks and stuff. But if that's the plan, is for Gutenberg to be part of the iOS app, part of the Android app, part of the macOS app, if it's going to be used in other places as a React type of component, then the name is Gutenberg, and the name it shouldn't go away. It is what it is. Now, how that's implemented into WordPress, I think is pretty straightforward, but should be scrutinized pretty heavily, the same way that TinyMCE was brought into WordPress, where TinyMCE was its own project, and maybe it benefited from being brought into WordPress. But TinyMCE shouldn't include a whole heck of a lot of WordPress-specific code, and WordPress shouldn't need to include a whole heck of a lot of TinyMCE bridge-type code. But all that you're doing is taking one piece of software and including it into another. And so what that looks like should be pretty loose. And if I want to write a TinyMCE plugin in WordPress, I can do that. And part of it is on the WordPress side, and part of it needs to dip into TinyMCE. And so I need to understand how TinyMCE works to write a good TinyMCE extension, but I also have to understand how WordPress works in order to write the PHP and queue the JavaScript and do all the other stuff. And so if Gutenberg is going to live on as a separate open source thing, if eventually Wix uses it, or Squarespace uses it, or some other piece of software uses it as its open source interface for publishing to the web, that only helps everyone else. It becomes this ubiquitous posting interface that's familiar and block-based, where it helps with importing and exporting data, it helps with moving stuff around, it helps with adaptability between blocks, across services. That's kind of the best case scenario, in my opinion, versus taking the 1.5 years worth of Gutenberg work and branding and videos and everything and just replacing it and calling it something else doesn't seem right either. I think if the goal is to absorb all of Gutenberg into WordPress, that's probably not the safest goal. It's probably not the smartest thing. And it is a lot of extra work that completely abandons all backwards compatibility with everyone that's been writing things with Gutenberg named stuff. So I think Morton's right in that we have created ourselves a pickle. But I think we were never in this pickle to begin with, because we kind of knew ahead of time that the goal was for Gutenberg to be a separate front-end posting interface in the very, very beginning.
So actually, the scenario you pointed out.
That's why I wanted him going first, man. That was good. That was good.
The scenario you pointed out turns out to be the case. Then everything we have today can stay as it is. It makes sense. And then we just have Gutenberg and iOS editor, Gutenberg editor and Android, Gutenberg and Calypso, Gutenberg and WordPress.com. It just becomes its own project. In fact, it could be its own open source project that even, who knows, we might see Gutenberg in Squarespace or
exactly
in Wix or in other platforms. It could be the block-based editor that other CMSs out there kind of attach onto or whatnot. So
there are a few others, right? There's Quill, right? Quill is one. There's CK Editor might be one. There are a few, right? And even Atom is what does it use? It uses there's CodeMirror. There are a bunch of like open source WYSIWYG editor things, right? And so Gutenberg is just another one of those, and that is its name.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but Ghost 1.0, is it Ghost 1.0? Or Ghost, a major version of Ghost that was released recently.
1.1 maybe, I think.
They have a block-based editor now, and I forget what it's based off of.
I remember reading the post, and we should look into it, and I should remember because I actually had a long conversation with John O'Nolan about it, exactly, and he linked me to like 50 cool things they used for inspiration, so I should have that like on the ready, but I don't.
Yeah, well, geez. How about that? All right, anyways, now we can get back to Zach's answer on this. Come on.
Which is way more important than mine.
No, I think that first of all, you outlined the essential point, and this is what we need to identify, which is one, this is a discussion, right? We said that Morten brought up, and Morten to me is kind of like the, what's his name?
He never stops thinking.
He's like the Aristotle of the WordPress community, you know? He's just like brilliant and he shines and he's smile. Like he's more smiley than I am, and that's hard to get. So like I have a ton of respect for him, and flat out like the reason I've started to change my own stuff is I don't want Morten to be mad at me and think that I'm doing something wrong. So like that happened immediately as soon as he posted. I'm like, oh, I got to go edit my site. Now that said, like let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, Gutenberg is a great name. Like I don't know that they could have come up with a more clever, publishy. Like it's clever. I like it. It's smart. The other thing for me is like there have been some tweets out like, if you don't change this now, you're going to become irrelevant. And I'm like, the plugin's called Gutenberg. The documentation is called Gutenberg. I get it. But for me, I felt like, okay, if we get to the point where this is in core, as a course developer, it makes sense to call it developing with the new WordPress editor. So I already went on my site, javascriptforwp.com, and I kind of renamed the course. It was originally Gutenberg development, and I renamed it to like WP block development or something like that. Now, when you go watch the videos, the slides and everything, I haven't had a chance to update all the videos, but that'll probably happen. And I know Joe Casabona, great educator, really friendly fellow. And as far as I know, he's the only other one, I think, with a course at this point. He kind of took the user approach and I took the dev approach. And he has a similar plan. As it gets closer to core, he's going to stop calling his course Gutenberg and start calling it working with the new editor. Because anybody that's looking for this stuff now knows what Gutenberg is searching by Gutenberg. Nobody's finding my course by searching for developing with the new WordPress editor. Nobody. So that is a reality of kind of where we are. But as we get to the point where it rolls into core, okay, that makes sense for me to shift the name of the course. Now, that said, from a marketing perspective, Joe and I got Gutenberg.courses. That's not going away. That's brilliant and smart and makes a lot of sense, right? Like that's how we're getting the traffic coming in and calling it that. We have like a Gutenberg Q&A, and like both Joe and I have talked about this, because as soon as Morten said that, we're like, uh-oh, are we doing something wrong? We gotta discuss this. And both of us agree, like as it gets closer to core, yeah, let's try to shift it. But that said, what happens when I want to do a course on the new customizer coming to WordPress, and that's built in like a feature plugin or a standalone product that is still Gutenberg? Because the core team, after, you know, if you read through there quite a while, at a certain point, I'm like, hey, how come nobody from core has actually commented or got involved in this discussion? And I've talked with people at Automatic about this. They're aware that we need to shift the language, right? But Matt's still using it in the state of the word. So we're obviously not there from their perspective. And they kind of came in and removed the tag of like, this needs to be resolved. So now it is a discuss amongst yourselves kind of thing, in my opinion. And I don't know that developer stuff, like Ahmed Awasu has done the like create Gutenberg, like kind of JavaScript NPM or like, you know, auto generator for blocks and his Gutenberg boilerplate. I don't know that that really needs to change, because the developers who are savvy are, for the foreseeable months, going to continue to know about this stuff. And I think that, you know, I just have faith that things will naturally start to shift, but I don't think that it would be practical or necessarily smart to tell everybody, like, shake their finger at him and say, you're bad for this. Like, honestly, out of nowhere, right? Like, there was no build up to this discussion. This just like dropped one day and was all of a sudden, you need to address this, everybody, right? And I love Morton. And like I said, like, I was like, uh-oh, and I changed the name of my course like that next day. And I started like resharing his stuff. And I'm like, Joe and I have a plan. We're going to do this. You know, Carl Hancock's like, Zach, are you going to do this, man? I'm like, yes, I'm sorry. So, but it's such a weird thing, like who I'm kowtowing to and how that's involved. So honestly, to me, this is kind of like a mute point that isn't really an issue. When you said like, it's an issue that's not an issue, I totally resonate with that. And down the road, like, yeah, we probably might not call it Gutenberg, but if it still is a plugin called Gutenberg, you still need to reference it by what it is. And it's going to exist independently of WordPress, even after the first part of it is rolled in. So
one of the other points I made in the GitHub thread was like, we have named WordPress themes after people since Kubrick. And we have named WordPress releases after jazz musicians since 1.2. We have
other projects as plugins that started out with co-names, like
and so even like the original redesign where we got the left-hand sidebar and eventually the admin bar was the Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse.
Oh, and so I forgot about that one.
There are a number of code names that stick. Like Microsoft Windows 95 was Windows Chicago. Windows NT was Windows Cairo. The iPhone 10 is Ferrari. There are names. The Xbox One X was Scorpio. People know those things, but only a select niche culty group of we care about the code name. And so there's a difference between a code name and an actual name. And I think Gutenberg is the actual name of this piece of software. This is not a code name. This is Gutenberg. And to white label that is good for 80 million WordPress users, that they don't care that it's called Gutenberg. But for us, for developers who are extending it, it matters to look for that thing, because the difference between writing a tiny MCE plugin using regular vanilla JavaScript or using React and writing a Gutenberg block, they're different things. You need to know what to look for. And so keeping it Gutenberg is actually the smarter thing to do, I think.
Yeah, that said, like one of the interesting things was that there is a Gutenberg project, and I think somebody posted up in the thread that that half their links coming in were people looking for something else. But I don't know that we could change that now. Like, there's a lot of content that's been kind of Gutenberg-y. So I don't know how much more I have to add. What I'm going to do for myself is my course on JavaScript for WP, which is where it lives. I'm going to begin removing that language. I am also going to continue to promote and market Gutenberg.courses and call it there and call it Gutenberg. So maybe I'll be doing both approaches. But if you buy it through Gutenberg.courses, you're going to end up on JavaScript for WP, and it's going to be referred to as the block editor and that sort of thing. So for me, that feels good, and it kind of covers my bases. I could feel like I'm being progressive and moving forward, but also, like, honestly, realistically, kind of being smart marketing wise, which maybe you could criticize for that, but that's where I am, to be honest.
I think this is one of those times where I am super curious to talk to you again in 6 months or a year, because you can look back and go, I should have stuck with Gutenberg. It should have went all in on the name and should have and then or you'll say, I'm so happy that we didn't stick with Gutenberg, because now it doesn't matter. It's still, if you would have went all in, it's a risk either way. So I'm really curious to talk to you after it all goes down.
We'll book them before WordCamp US. We'll book them. We'll get them out.
Sweet. I would love that.
We'll get them out just before then. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground here today. I want to thank you for being on the show. Any last questions, John, before we wrap it up with Zach here?
I have one final question. And it's probably not a good closing question, though, but I guess now's the time, right? So it's a competitive space that you're in, and there are other people, and I don't think there's any issues naming competitors, but there are other people, WP Sessions, WP 101. There are folks that have been doing this for a while, and I have a hard time placing the timeline with who started what when and who's been doing it longer and who's. I just don't know who started what and who's taking inspiration from whom. And so my last question for you, I guess, is, well, you were learning how to do videos and put them online, and you do your market research to figure out who's around in the space. What did that process, I guess, look like for you, especially when you were like, I'm independent now, I have competition, I'm somebody else's competition. How do we traverse this? And so I'm curious what your experience was with that.
So first of all, let me just like mimic or say something that probably everybody will get, which is I'm friends with a lot of these people, and they're good, genuine people, and we all care. And so I think that agencies feel that way. I think that plugin developers feel that way. Maybe not all of them, but in general, we have a really cool community. If we were a bunch of jackarses, like I would not be hanging around. Like I love the people, and that makes a difference. So that said, it has been tricky, right? Like, you want to hear a funny story? The reason I did my master course, this was not my original plan. I wanted to start the site WP Devcasts and do kind of a Laracast model. And my first goal was to do a WordPress REST API course. But Josh Pollock already had one, and I didn't know Josh, and I was so intimidated. And I remember the first time I walked up and introduced myself, and I was like all timid, and I didn't even teach that course because he had one, and I was so afraid to step on toes, so I did something completely different. And it's tricky. Like there are some educators, like I think there's great people doing a lot of stuff. In my opinion, one of the highest actual like educator with the background and experience is Tanya Mork. And she runs the site knowthecode.io. Now she has insane amount of background. I mean, just incredible stuff. She's had a like out of body experience and like gone beyond life and come back and like, I need to give my life to caring for people and teaching. Like, powerful woman. And we talk regularly, and she has kind of taken the PHP approach and I've taken the JavaScript, and there's not too much overlap. But it's tricky now with this Gutenberg stuff. Like, I knew that a lot of other people that I am friends with, and we haven't had too much overlap. Again, I did a master course on JavaScript. I knew nobody in their right mind would tackle this project. That is an insane thing that you literally have to quit your job to do and probably go into debt doing. So I didn't feel too much competition there. But with the Gutenberg, I was like, I got a race to be first to market because these people that I'm good friends with are also going to try to do this. And that's a little tricky. And I mean, what are we going to do? But I do believe in abundance. And I think that there's enough room for all of us. And honestly, like, my goal long-term is not to just teach, but I want to work with teachers. I want to hire teachers. I'd love to build a school one day. So, you know, if things don't always work out in the small picture, like I'm okay with that, but it is tricky. And luckily there's enough difference between each of us, and we talk behind the scenes. There's even a mastermind of educators that is going on. So that's really cool. And we do kind of have to niche ourselves and be careful. So I don't know. Does that help or answer? I feel like I'm just rambling at this point.
No, that answers. That's what I said. It's not a great closing question, but I guess the way to tie a bow on it, right, is to end where we started, which is if it wasn't for everyone else, then none of us would be here. And everyone has always been super supportive, and so I appreciate you hanging out with us for the past hour. It was a pleasure.
Oh, this was such an honor. Thank you, y'all.
Tell us a little bit about the courses you have available. In fact, the Gutenberg course just became available, and tell us a little bit about the thing you'll be doing with Jason on Fridays. Was it Jason or Jose, or is it the live Q&A?
Oh, yeah, Joe. Okay.
Joe.
Yes. So first of all, please check out my site, javascriptforwp.com. I actually stopped offering my master course. It was a very hard. I have to charge so much money for it, for what it's worth, and it's hard for people to pay, and it's hard for me to make a living. So that's no longer available. And I took about 20 hours of content from that, and I released a new vanilla JavaScript deeply course. So that's kind of my starting point for everybody and it covers ES6. It covers like beginner JavaScript. You're going to build a single page app from scratch. Like, it's good. It's comprehensive, and I feel good about that. So that's the starting point. And then I have a course on front-end masters where I actually wrote front-end masters. Is like, hey, can I get a discount for my students? And they said, hey, you want to come to a course here? And they're kind of the upper echelon of learning JavaScript online, not WordPress. So I'm pointing everybody there, and that's my REST API, decoupled authentication, Ajax, like that's kind of that. And now my Gutenberg course. And so these three, the vanilla JavaScript, the REST API stuff, and the Gutenberg, are kind of what I'm trying to market around. I'm going to be releasing a free course on JavaScript development tools. And so that'll come out when my next update to Gutenberg comes out, because again, like, I'm just going to start shaking my finger at people. Like, you need to learn ES6, you need to learn Webpack, stop making excuses. And so I want to make that as easy as possible. And Wes Boss is my idol, so I'm going to be like him and do it for free. And then later this year, at some point, I've got to do a React for WordPress course. So that's kind of where I'm at with courses. Now, Joe and I agreed to do a Q&A, a live Q&A. If you go to gutenberg.courses, you can find this. And we're going to do it every other week. And he's going to answer all the user questions. I'm going to answer the development one, basically until it rolls into core. So we had our first one. It was pretty fun. I don't know how helpful it will be for folks, but we just thought it would be cool. And we're doing that. So you could check that. It's every other week going on until that happens.
Do you go into tools like editors and setting stuff up and getting environments set up and everything?
Yeah, and I have a 7 or 8 hour section in my JavaScript course on, I do Atom, and then I do WebStorm, PHP WebStorm, and command line and grunt gulp Webpack and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that
was one of the things when I was learning React. It was really helpful to actually dip into a completely separate editor and environment and set of tools. It was like if you were a surgeon and you were going to learn how to operate on a different body part or a different creature, you would want to do it in a different environment with different scalpels and the right size tools. And so not that what I have used for WordPress isn't probably adequate, but it was really nice to go, okay, how does someone who doesn't care about WordPress write code using Atom and React and JavaScript and Node and Webpack and Babel and ES7 or whatever? Like it was just really refreshing to just go into a completely different world without any of my previous tooling, like little habits, and just create new habits. So it's a good idea to go through all that stuff.
It is fun, although the coming back can be a little jarring sometimes.
That's true. That is true.
This is nice. You're like, oh yeah.
I did that when I taught myself Dvorak. I can't type QWERTY anymore. QWERTY's gone for me.
So thanks again, Zach, for being on the show today. Excellent work with your educational content with the WordPress community, and we hope the best for you. And keep on teaching people Gutenberg, or whatever we call it, in the future.
Hey, thanks, y'all, and thanks for the work you do. I've been big fans of both of you and honored to get to know you over the years. So thanks again for having me on the show and doing what y'all do.
Feelings mutual, Zach.
I'm getting all the feels.
Group hug here, guys.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good.
All right, Zach, thanks for being on the show, man. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
See you, Zach. You too.
There you folks have it. Zach Gordon, WordPress educator extraordinaire. Covered a lot of ground there. See, we do have a couple of stories. Let's talk about the big story that broke earlier today. This is before the show went live. And that is iThemes is joining the Liquid Web family. So iThemes has been its own company. It's an independent company for the past 10 years. In fact, it just recently celebrated its 10th birthday, and now it will be owned and operated by Liquid Web, of all hosting companies. So let's see, a couple of details here. They're going to be integrating their products like Backup Buddy and the WordPress security plugin into their managed hosting platform. In fact, Liquid Web just did their managed WooCommerce hosting, and iThemes has the Sales Accelerator, which is a new plugin and iOS app for WooCommerce. So, that's pretty complimentary. Now, as for the team, their leadership team will continue to lead iThemes as an independent unit within Liquid Web, Corey Miller will be the general manager, and Matt Danner will be the director of technology and operations. They will have their headquarters, and their team will remain in Oklahoma City. And according to post status, this was an all-cash deal. So stakeholders have cashed out. And congratulations to Corey Miller, iThemes, the team. And we can go in. I could speculate and go into this a little bit, share my thoughts on this. But just wanted to say congrats to Corey and everybody else involved there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the two things that I would know that most people, three maybe, is one, everyone that was involved in this deal was like super pro about it, because no one said anything at Cabo Press. No one has said anything at Beach Press. I wasn't there, but I know that everyone that has been out in the world that's been involved in this deal has been lips zipped about anything that was happening with this. So that is amazing. Two, one of the replies that I had on Twitter was sort of like, since when is selling your business like a good thing? And that was a valid question, and mostly citing layoffs or just people moving around or people exiting or people not keeping their jobs. And Chris Lemma from Liquid Web, a huge fan, he replied back and said, the good news is no one lost their jobs and nobody had their salary reduced. So it seems like the way that companies do this was the best case scenario really for everyone, that everyone just transitions in from the old company at iThemes to the iThemes that just happens to have Liquid Web's umbrella kind of, covering it from the Liquid Web rain, I guess. There's a pun there that I can't make live right now. But also, I sent Matt a text that said, dude, like, what is this? And his response is like, just glad to have the deal done so that everyone can get back to building cool stuff in the world. So it's like, this is one of those things where I think everyone is friends. Everyone's been iThemes and Liquid Web have had a relationship in the past with selling products and themes, and so this is like a great setup. It sounds like for everyone, similar to Securi and GoDaddy, where everyone is, you network, you hang out, you figure there are like-minded people in a place. Somebody's already a fan of what it is that you do, and so that's how you get brought under the fold. And so to come to an agreement, to bring everybody on board, to have everyone, at least on the surface, seem like they're happy is that's like a best case scenario. So I think it's worth saying congratulations to everybody, and like good on you for keeping everything under wraps so tightly for as long as they were.
And even though it was under wraps, I mean, to me, the companies involved here is no surprise to me. I mean, if you look back, if you pay attention, which I guess it's kind of my job to pay attention to this stuff. If you go all the way back, I mean, in 2014, 2013, it might be 2014, iThemes started to create partnerships with SiteGround and ClickHost and some of the other web hosting companies to work with them exclusively because hosting was a big issue. In dealing with customer support for their products, them dealing with host was an issue. And then there is a strategic partnership between iThemes and, at the time, Crowd Favorite that Chris Lemma was involved in. They established a relationship there, and then eventually Chris Lemma moved on from Crowd Favorite. In December of 2016, he became the vice president of products at Liquid Web, and he's been managing the team. He's brought on some other some very talented WordPress people, such as Norcross. We know Norcross on Twitter, and a couple of other people, and then the managed WooCommerce hosting product. And throughout that time, the past few years, Corey and his wife, I believe his wife, works for Liquid Web, and Corey has visited the Liquid Web offices a couple of times over the past few years, and And I think, and with that established relationship with Chris Lemma, I think it just sort of all, it's no surprise to me that this sort of worked out in the end. And, in all these previous couple of years, maybe this was just in the talking to. But I've had Corey Miller.
Even back last year, 2 years ago, I'd have to look back. But Corey and Lindsay were kind enough to invite my wife Carrie and I to the Friends of iThemes hangout that happened before the first WordCamp that was in
the first WordCamp Oklahoma City. And so Jim Geiger, the CEO of Liquid Web, was there. Chris Lemma was there. There were lots of folks that were already there that were already friendly with one another. And so whether or not other people saw this writing on the wall or whether or not this was a long time coming is who cares? What matters is a bunch of people that enjoy working on similar stuff and want to. I mean, looking at the Jim's quote on the Liquid Web site, our grand ambition is to be the most loved hosting provider in the world. Who better to pair up with than Corey Miller, who's like one of the most lovable people in the WordPress community, but also iThemes has like a great reputation for building great products and doing really good work. Like, if it's not surprising that they would buddy up and that we've gotten to this point. So it just makes all the sense in the world to me. I'll put on my speculation hat, but I've had Corey Miller on the show a couple of times, and one of the questions I ask him is, "Hey, you've been involved and been doing this for so long. What is your exit strategy? I mean, how much longer do you see yourself in the position of owning the company, being CEO? Your family has grown. You have other passion projects. You're getting up there. I don't want to say he's getting up there in age, but I mean,
hey.
He's getting older. He's getting wiser. And
more handsome.
You're running a company. I mean, you're dealing with the iceberg of life here and running a successful company. And I just think that now with this acquisition, there's no mention of this. There's no even hint that this is part of a personal exit strategy. But now, if it comes to that, he doesn't have to worry about his employees and what's going to happen to them. He doesn't have to worry about his company. He could just step down. He can leave. He can know it's in good hands, and he can move on and pursue other passions or do other things that he's interested in.
Maybe, and that maybe, and if that's true, all the best, right? Because he will be successful no matter where he goes, and that might be what happens. I don't think so, though, because Corey is one of the most insightful and like self-reflective, in tune people that you could probably ever meet in the WordPress community, and so he would be one of the few people that I would 100% trust to have he knows what his next step is with this move, and he knows what he can bring to a company like Liquid Web, and he wouldn't make the decision to move his entire team into or underneath somebody else's supervision without it being exactly what he planned for it to be, and without him having a plan for his own happiness and everything going forward. So I doubt that this is an exit strategy as much as this is he gets to work on bigger, cooler challenges using everything that he's spent the past 10 years building up with the team and friends and family at iThemes. He just gets to deploy that with bigger and better Liquid Web things. So,
well, I want to stress that I don't think this is all an extra strategy, that this is his way of getting out of doing whatever he's doing. I just think that if it ever came to that, it's not possible for him to do without worrying about all the other things with his company's employees and whatnot. I think, and this was sort of illustrated in the response that Matt gave you, is, hey, now this is a huge load off our shoulders. This is something we no longer have to worry about. And I think that probably gives Matt and Corey and his team renewed effort and focus to kick ass and to really innovate and focus other efforts on improving their products and making improving their new products as well. So
yep,
I think it's just
that they trust.
Yep,
exactly. With people that they trust, with people that they like, with people that like them. I mean, this is just a double down of efforts and moving forward onto bigger and better things and bringing everyone you love with you under the fold. So congratulations, Liquid Web and iThemes, much deserved, and keep rocking.
So GoDaddy acquires Securi, and now Liquid Web acquires iThemes. What's next on the block? Which hosting company is going to acquire what WordPress company, product company? Because iThemes, man, that's they're part of the old guard. They're part of the companies that arose out of the young days of WordPress, 2008 and on. They've been around for a while, so they have quite the portfolio.
It goes to something that I've said before, is that distribution really is always the hardest part. And the companies that can successfully solve the distribution model, I don't care if it's Amazon or GoDaddy or Google or Liquid Web or anyone, that ultimately, if what you build is a product, I don't care if you write a book, if you write music, if you whatever it is, that ultimately whoever distributes your thing is the thing that they are responsible for everything it is that you are capable of doing kind of going forward. That's what makes being independent, like Zach, difficult, or myself for a long time difficult, is your distribution is you, and it is only your core niche group of supporters. And so that doesn't get you 2 million installs like WooCommerce has. That doesn't get you the 300,000 or 400,000 installs that BuddyPress and BBPress have, thanks to being sister projects to WordPress. And the distribution of WordPress.org and putting plugins on there is kind of a solved problem. But at the same time, there's no money really to be made directly from WordPress.org. So the companies that are there to be absorbed are products that have relationships or that are looking to have relationships with hosting companies. Our hosting companies are the distributors of WordPress in this model. And all of the authors are plugin and theme authors that need to pair up with a hosting company. WordPress.com proved this 10 years ago. Premium themes on WordPress.com sell. And partnering with WordPress.com to sell your premium themes makes you money. Like that, they had distribution, and themes were the model, were the product. Plugins didn't get there, but plugins will get there on WordPress.com or on business plans or on VIP. It's just we're early days with that part of the market. So the next companies that'll be bought or the ones that are acqui-hired or that get looped in are the ones that have products that are already being widely deployed and used by hosting companies. So that's your hint. If you're anything you see, and that's one of the things that really should be a key strategy for a product or a company. I don't care if it's the folks at Ninja Forms or the Gravity Forms or anything else, getting a one-click install, turnkey recommendation or a discount on a product just because you start a GoDaddy site for $9.99 and they give you a discount off Gravity Forms because of it, then those pairings, those relationships are the next way that everyone cashes in on the distribution of WordPress across the web, I think.
And speaking of shiny and new things, WooCommerce 3.3 has been released. According to their new release strategy, it's considered a minor release. However, it has quite a few new and improved things, such as a revamped order screen. So the order screen now has been overhauled. So now instead of little icons, there's big sort of clear buttons now that lets you know if an order is processing or canceled, and you can see order details now without needing to actually edit an order. Something that I think is pretty cool is stock status for products on back order. So if you have a product and you have stock management enabled, the status will actually automatically transition from in stock to on back order or out of stock as inventory decreases. And as you add in stock, it'll actually come back, transition back to saying in stock. So that's pretty neat. Now here's something that reminded me of BuddyPress in a way, and I get your take on this. Is better support for non-WooCommerce themes and the ability to set the number of rows and columns for your shop. So previously, we had WordPress themes had to specifically declare support so that most things in WooCommerce looked and functioned properly on your site, on the front end of your site. Well, they've made a couple of changes, and they've improved the way WooCommerce renders on themes that don't formally declare WooCommerce support. So you should be able to use WooCommerce, and it should look okay on almost any theme from WordPress.org. Now, you know, there's other features such as automatic thumbnail regeneration and whatnot in WooCommerce 3.3, but I was just reading today that the stable tag has been reverted from 3.3 to the previous release due to some incompatibilities that they discovered, specifically detailing what the theme compatibility changes they made. So apparently it's not working out for everybody, and it just sort of reminds me of your work with BuddyPress involved with trying to make it compatible and display properly on almost any WordPress theme.
That was tough. Theme compatibility is really, really difficult and it's really important that plugins or applications like WooCommerce or BuddyPress have some version of this, because it's a lot of work to build a theme that has all of the extra little bits and templates for a shopping cart, a cart that's empty, a cart that's full, checkout pages, coupons, discounts, your customer page, your previous purchases, shipping, all the variants, all the add-ons, the hundreds of add-ons that WooCommerce has. Adding baked-in support without breaking other things is just a lot. It is a lot to take on and do. The first version of that with BBPress was easier to do because themes were kind of simpler in 2010. There was less going on. And forums are still as complicated as forums can be. They are, and they can be really simple. And so what we expect a forum to look like is kind of universal, maybe tweaks, but we all expect a similar looking thing. Even BuddyPress with activity streams or friends or a profile, we all have a version of that kind of has a universal look and feel to it, where we can package a theme compatibility in it in such a way that it gets people far enough. But an online store is everything from Craigslist to Amazon to eBay. Like, they all look totally different, and what you need really heavily influences how your sales work out and how successful your business is. So all of the caveats that the folks at Woo had to plan for, it wouldn't surprise me that they maybe wouldn't hit a home run out of the gate. But kudos to them for trying, because it is super useful to have something baked in there. Talking about WooCommerce reminded me of a thing that I just linked you to, Jeff. The ongoing issue that the folks at WooCommerce have had with scalability and scaling an application like WooCommerce up into super active stores, and the work that the folks at Liquid Web, Steve Grunwell, Norcross, and others, that they have worked on scaling WooCommerce for Liquid Web specifically, in a way that they're hoping to contribute back to WooCommerce core for customer products and custom tables for scaling the metadata out of post meta and into separate database tables. And so there were some recent updates on some of this work that were happening in a GitHub issue that I happen to be subscribed to just from commenting. So there's some work that's happening there.
And it seems maybe it's just for e-commerce stuff, but the word custom database tables seems to be popping up in front of me quite often. I think it's because of EDD, Easy Digital Downloads, and now I'm seeing it in WooCommerce. I don't want to get too involved in the discussion here, but it seems like just on the surface, if you want better performance, you got to use custom database tables.
So here's the take on this. So I could talk about this a
Do a
little
TLDR
bit.
version.
TLDR. And so, full disclosure, I'm working on the EDD custom database tables for EDD3. So
there you go.
Happen to know quite a bit about it. However, the TLDR of all of this, and this is the lessons that we've learned from BuddyPress, honestly, is custom database tables are the easiest way to scale your plugin in a way that WordPress users are comfortable with. It won't make a really hugely active website much better in the end, because those are traditional web scaling problems that go beyond WordPress. They go into multiple copies of databases to have fast reads on one and fast writes on another. They go into making sure that your web servers, you have multiple web heads that are all configured properly to handle sessions and shopping carts with the type of caching that it requires to limit all of the pain points and requests that happen. There are lots of other things that have to happen for any website to scale to the amount of traffic that a lot of the higher end EDD or WooCommerce websites run into. And so BuddyPress and WordPress.com, with having global tables, it is easy to say custom database tables are the solution. I know that is a solution, but that it is only one part of 10. And so custom database tables says, okay, this data doesn't affect this data anymore. So your WooCommerce store, your EDD store won't affect your blog directly or your pages directly anymore, because that data is just going to live outside of your posts. However, the store itself still has to query for everything else. So you're still doing the same amount of work. The only difference is you're doing it in a much more optimized, purpose-built kind of way. And so the pain of that is lessened for a long time. But once you start doing 1,000 sales a second on your WooCommerce store, the custom database tables it does not solve that problem for you. You need other things to solve that problem. So
Okay.
The good thing about it being today and not BuddyPress from 10 years ago is that we get to make the developer experience of working with custom database tables easier than what it was when everything was written and kind of bespoke. And so the other thing that you sacrifice by having a custom way to get stuff in and out of these custom tables that we're making is developers have to learn how to interact with your new database tables. It's not as easy as calling get post anymore. Everyone knows get post. Everyone knows WP query. And so when someone has to learn, or a team of people have to learn how to write a WooCommerce product query, sure, they can learn it, but they knew how to do WP query in memory. They do not know how to use your new thing. So there are trade-offs here. And so I know on the EDD side of it, we are working very hard to have this be a transition that is almost invisible to like every user that upgrades. And so whatever we can do to help the folks at WooCommerce, or whatever they can do to help us, I think we're all starting to go down this path together at the same time. And it's kind of going to be exciting.
There will be knowledge shared within the GitHubs, I imagine.
Absolutely.
So just to wrap this all around, so there is that theme compatibility issue that's been identified. They're working on it. I've seen the GitHub ticket. Expect a WooCommerce 3.3.1 fairly shortly to fix those issues. And of course, the full change log will be linked to in the show notes. There's other things you might want to take note of in there. And last but not least, Updraft Plus has acquired the Easy Updates Manager plugin from Rana Durica, Matthew Sparrow, and Bigwig Interactive, and Rory Tubbs. Now, Easy Updates Manager was created in 2015. It's actively installed on more than 100,000 sites. And what it did is disabled sort of the update system in WordPress, and it gave users granular control over core, plugin, and theme updates. You could even configure updates on a per plugin or per theme level, which was pretty cool. So they've actually Updraft Plus has taken in the plugin because updates and backups and what they're doing with their Updraft Central service is pretty complementary of each other. I think Ronald will be staying on the team to help out and continue working with the plugin. But congrats to him, and a pretty nice adoption story, sort of, for the Easy Updates Manager plugin. If you're a user of that plugin, you should expect more updates and further refinements of the user interface. Not really much is going to be changing for you, except for the better.
Well, and a cash payout for a plugin that you have worked on for a long time that goes to a good home, it's kind of great. If you're at a point where you aren't sure what to do with it anymore, or you're in maintenance mode with it and someone else really loves it, I mean, that's...
And I think we have to place emphasis on a good home. Because it was Updraft Plus, they're an established company. Their plugins installed on more than 1 million sites. You don't have to worry about them turning around, putting a back door in your plugin, and now your reputation's screwed. So
exactly.
You don't have to worry about that. So congrats to Toronto and the team over there at Updraft Plus. So that's going to do it for this episode of WordPress, this long episode of WordPress Weekly. But damn, if it's not, if it's not worth it to listen to the entire episode of the show, I don't have a pick of the week, and even if I did, I'd skip it just for brevity's sake here. But we're going to have on Mark Benzakein next week on next week's show, and we're going to catch up with him on Desktop Server. And the last time he was on WordPress Weekly, we didn't get a chance to talk about the sort of the other side of the non-technical side of Mark, and that is bringing in children into his home and the things he's done as a foster parent. And really, I'd like to highlight his talk that was at WordCamp US in his journey to better health. And I think it's something that will resonate with a lot of people, not only just in the WordPress community, but maybe tech in general. And it's going to be one of those enlightening episodes. So I can't wait to have Mark on and finally catch up a little bit with him.
And Mark's, he's a Milwaukeean. So,
well, he's a Milwaukeean, but he hasn't been spending much time there lately. He's he's doing a lot of traveling. We'll have to ask him about that. No, we have to have a website. Where'smark.com.
I've ran into Mark on airplanes so many times. Flying to a WordCamp, like, oh, you're going there too? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's hang out. That's awesome. I've said multiple times. Mark's a good guy. I'm excited to hang out with.
We'll have Mark on, and then we'll be into the month of February. So looking forward to that. I have a couple of guests scheduled. So
I don't have a pick of the week, but I do have a fun gizmo that I can share.
Okay.
That isn't WordPress related again. But it is a cool little thing I found that probably was on Kickstarter. I'm not really sure. But their website is beamauthentic.com, B-E-A-M authentic. And so I bought one. It's the dorkiest thing ever. And it reminds me of Shirt Tales. Do you remember Shirt Tales? Remember that cartoon where they had like animals that lived in a tree and their shirts said stuff? I'm probably making this up, but that was the thing. So it's a beam is like a little circle screen that has a magnet, and it's like a little OLED, and it stays on for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and you can have it stay stuff or do
stuff. It's like
stuff
a button that displays different things.
It's exactly right. So I'm going to use a beam to replace my badges at WordCamps. Like I'll just put like
J3
on my beam instead of having a badge. Or like make a separate badge for it. But there's like a whole ecosystem and community of people that are making like badges for, like, obviously for causes, right? So what's the bunch of water ones? I can't think of the...
F cancer.
Yeah, right. And so like the community behind it is really cool. The fact that it is largely about bringing awareness to issues in the world, but also gives you kind of a tool to express yourself in a unique way on your clothing without it having to, be smart clothing or anything like that. It's dorky and it's totally a gizmo, but like think of wearing it like a button where you can have it say "I voted" on the thing, or
you're going to wear your J's on your chest, is what you're saying.
I guess I am. I guess that's what's going to happen.
So I have a link to this in the show notes. Beam Authentic. It
cool.
looks like you can program a couple different ones on there, and it can flash between them.
I programmed a bunch of WordPress logos, BuddyPress, BBPress logos, all that kind of stuff. So it's
you should go to WordCamp and troll people with having a Fogo.
That's a great idea.
So there you go.
It's so good.
And see how many people know it. No,
it's
like walking trivia,
that's hilarious. Okay.
All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of WordPress Weekly. You can find show notes for this episode and all other episodes on WPTavern.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeffrey JFFR0 and John
JJJ on GitHub and Twitter, jjj.blog on the web.
All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon. Say bye, John.
Bye, John. Bye, John.